So that may or may not be helpful because my answer is I'm sort of dodging a little bit, but that's just because if my players ask a question like that about my world, I'm going to go, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I couldn't possibly. I mean, you have to talk to maybe you could ask some clerics or priests about that. It's a good question, Rodrigo. All right, how do you fix the quote, why don't the gods interfere? This problem has the capacity to wipe out all their followers. Why are they not doing anything? I think that there are a few explanations, and it's basically character work. It's just character work on the gods. So, you know, so this is the kind of stuff. This is a good example of a question that I will generally never engage with above table. So if my party is having this discussion, and maybe they ask like, "Hey, if we're taking this job and that's from this cleric, or whatever, why doesn't this cleric just ask their gods?" I might agree that like that's an interesting question, and they should go interrogate the world. They should go ask that question in the world. I'm never going to say anything as the DM. And the reason is because depending on who they ask, because the gods should be mysterious by nature, they might ask one character, and that character says, the gods don't care. What do they care about this problem? These are mortal issues. They couldn't be bothered. They might ask a different character, and that character is going to say, oh, they're not helping because, I don't know if you know this, but the gods are interested, but they're on the other side. They're rooting for the other camp. Yeah, you guys may have the wrong impression of those gods of yours. They might ask a different character. A different character might say, the gods? They can't help you. What stories do you believe about the gods? Just because they, put us all here, just because they were here first, what, you think they're all powerful? They're as helpless as the rest of us. I feel like my goal would be to keep the truth shrouded, because to me, the character development and the world development is a lot more interesting if they have to sort of like form an opinion or put their faith in an idea and go test that idea. Especially in a fantasy game where the party can actually like face the gods or speak to them some way or another. How much more interesting if the party has been, well, our understanding is that we've been doing this for you, and only then when dealing with a particular emissary or an avatar of the god or whatever it's going to be, only then do you actually hear what they have to say. So that may or may not be helpful because my answer is I'm sort of dodging a little bit, but that's just because if my players ask a question like that about my world, I'm going to go, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't possibly. I mean, you have to talk to maybe you could ask some clerics or priests about that, right? I'm basically verbally switching over and sitting on their side of the table. Like, yeah, I agree, guys. We should go find somebody and talk to them about this, because by doing so, they're gonna learn about that like truthiness of the world that I'm always aiming for. Like, this feels like a real place, and these things aren't definitively known. And every person that they talk to who answers, their answer is going to tell them about that character, tell them about their view of the world. Are they cynical? Are they hopeful? Do they have faith, or have they, and who's correct? Some players, some groups, some tables, some DMs much prefer these things to be cut and dry and explained, and I respect that. I have no interest in it. I think that even if there is a truth, it's a lot easier, and practically speaking, for me at the table running these things, I don't even need to know the truth right now. I just need to express what the characters in the world think the truth is. What's their understanding of this? And the only time I have to answer is if the party ever finds themselves standing before the gods to find out, So even when I've, writing out like a pantheon or trying to do world building and like create gods and stuff like that, it's got to be from the perspective of the culture and the people who I'm specifically looking at. It's not necessarily true. It's a story. And that story may have connections to things that end up becoming true in the history of my world. I don't have a complete history to even point to. But yeah, that's kind of how I approach it. And I feel like this question, your question is specifically about the gods, but this also comes up sometimes in a different way, about like quest givers in general. It's a little different when you could go out to buy some bread and meet Zeus on the way home. True. Well, every world's going to be a little bit different how they approach those things, and how much you can verify these claims. I'm just going to climb Mount Olympus and know for certain that it were that easy. But even without the God component, it's kind of like students in class asking, like, when are we ever going to use this? Or why do we need to know about trigonometry or something? Players can also say, why doesn't this person giving us the quest, like, why doesn't the retired adventurer just do it? Like, look at that sword. Look at all their stuff. And there's a few different answers, right? The meta answer above table is like, well, would you rather hear about them playing the game, or do you want to play the game? That's kind of a silly answer. It's a lot more interesting within the game world to say, like, well, the first word of their role is retired adventurer. They don't want to do that anymore. But no, they're not just going to hand you their sword. That's sentimental value, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it is an interesting question. I think I don't always think of it this way, and I think it's worth all of us being challenged into, like, wait, why are we the best people to do this? And I think that could be answered interestingly from the god's perspective, or from just a random quest giver. Why has the emissary from the king specifically asked us to do this? Maybe it's because they're expendable, or maybe it's because nobody knows who they are, and so if they fail miserably, the king can, it wasn't us, it was these guys, right? Sometimes figuring out what the answer to those questions, this can be really fun and revealing about how the world is responding to the player group, I think. Yeah, good question. Hard to say, because I really haven't done many genres. All that I've really done is, one shots are only a taste of things. I mean, my fantasy world is a hodgepodge of different sort of genres, depending on what I need. At the time, it's very flexible. So I'd really like to try other stuff. I think I even have a short that goes up either tomorrow or the day after about how it'd be fun to make some sort of like direct homages to Goosebumps books, to do some like kids sessions, some kids one shots. I think that could be really fun. I think I have a lot of love for sort of like Cthulhu, like Lovecraftian type of stories. Definitely played a bunch of that before getting into D&D. Sort of the gateway game for my wife and I was the game Mansions of Madness. And I really want to do some space stuff. I think sort of that like creeping existential dread of space could be fun. But all of this is future opportunity, right? I have really only run a few campaigns, and they're all run for a long, long time. So with this island game that I started running a few weeks ago, this is really the first one where I'm like, okay, let me try to see if I can run something meaningful in 10 sessions. And I think that so far I've realized that I absolutely can. And while it is more work, it's a different kind of work. that could actually be really interesting, and I might be better off trying to do that a few times a year rather than running one big epic campaign story for an entire year. Because then I can try out more stuff. Then I can take a campaign and run something specifically written for like kids with bikes. You know, that might be a system that would be fun to use for like something Goosebumps inspired. Or superheroes. I love the idea, even if the execution in media is sometimes a little bit, but I love the idea of sort of like the third or fourth rate heroes. I think the first season of the show Heroes, way back in the days when it was competing with Lost, as we were spoiled with excellent sci-fi TV back then. Heroes and Invincible, a lot of like the heroes that are created for that. It'd be fun to take inspiration from that kind of stuff and use, you know, a different system for that. I have a bunch of stuff on my shelf that I want to dig into. Yeah, I'll say so my and I really it's far past time for me to have, you know, a proper intro video on the channel that kind of describes this, but you know, my interests are varied, right? I do craft things and I do paint things, and I really love making puzzles and making props for the game. But ultimately, all of those things are in service of a better time at the table. I don't really do any of those things just for the sake of doing them. I do them because I imagine and am trying to get to this sort of awesome time that everybody's having. And so that's the effort, I guess, behind that. And then what I want out of the channel, and obviously I have aspirations towards putting some of the stuff that I dream up out into the world, like this one shot, and maybe people will like it. But I also am trying to make the channel something that a resource that I really wanted when I was getting started as a dungeon master, which is sort of something that exposes the process. What does it really take to write your own sessions and to make a one shot, and what does it look like to sort of craft a session and build all of these things and think about all this stuff? You know, there are a lot of great talks, and you can see people run a lot of things, but I really wanted to see sort of behind the curtain and get a sense from the person, you know, that was making it happen as to how they did that. I don't think I've really achieved that yet on this channel, but those are sort of the aspirations. So when I've got stuff coming up about like, you know, interviews with dungeon masters, and I've got some, you know, sessions that I'll be running on the channel, breakdowns of encounter designs and the things that I run, and like fleshing all of this out and putting all of these things out. That's ultimately the goal. So I think that you know, realistically, the channel is going to succeed or fail in a couple different dimensions, right? The goals that I have, it's multifaceted, because there are some people who are not interested in the nuts and bolts, and they just want fun stuff that they can run at their table, and I want to make that and hopefully make it in a way that's like fun to use, made more usable than, you know, certainly when I'm making something like this one shot, it's sort of a commentary on modules that I see where I'm like, ugh. Like, for instance, from a usability perspective, one of the most important things for me in, you know, cracking open a book, module, one shot, whatever it is this page here. So a lot of modules and adventures are written kind of like stories that you have to read through as the person running it. And it's like, who's got time for that? So this idea of like, hey, during this adventure, your players will, and it's like, boom, boom, boom. We're gonna spoil it as much as possible. We're gonna reveal the twists and turns of whatever the story is gonna be. That's what this page should do. And this is the type of page that I've always wanted when I'm like, how can I even tell when I'm holding a, let's say like a Waterdeep adventure book? It's like, who's the monster? Who's the big bad of this? And if I have to flip around and try to find, I'm like, am I going to misunderstand? I can't stand that. So I think I certainly have things to say in this space with these kinds of products, and rather than just say them, I'm going to try to make them and put them out and see if I, see if anybody else agrees.